there are growing calls to address these inequalities, particularly the wage inequality, with more taxes. In particular, in the United States, there's been a call by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to tax people earning over 10 million at a 70% tax rate. The current top rate in the United States is 37%. Michael Dell, do you support this?
No, I'm not supportive of that.
Well, Keith.
And I don't think it would help the growth of the U.S. economy.
Oh, that's interesting. And can you say a little bit more about why? Why you don't think it would?
Well, name a country where that's worked, ever.
United States.
Briefly, in the 80s.
No. From about the 1930s through about the 1960s, the tax rate averaged about 70%. At times, it was up as high as 95%. And those were actually pretty good years for growth. So I don't have a strong opinion on that proposal. A lot of the devil is in the details. But I think it's there's actually a lot of economics that suggests that it's not necessarily going to hurt growth.
This is my first time at Davos, and I find it quite a bewildering experience, to be honest. I mean, 1,500 private jets have flown in here to hear Sir David Attenborough speak about, how we're wrecking the planet. And I hear people talk in the language of participation and justice and equality and transparency. But then, almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. It feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water, right? there was only one panel, actually.
Well, we've had two. You're the second of our panelists.
There was only one panel.
Let's go there.
One panel hidden away in the media center that was actually about tax avoidance. Yeah. I was one of the 15 participants. So something needs to change here. 10 years ago, the World Economic Forum asked the question, what must industry do to prevent a broad social backlash? The answer is very simple. Just stop talking about philanthropy and start talking about taxes. Taxes. We need to, just 2 days ago, there was a billionaire in here, what's his name? Michael Dell. And he asked the question like, name me one country where a top marginal tax rate of 70% has actually worked. And, I'm a historian. The United States, that's where it has actually worked. In the 1950s, during Republican President Eisenhower, the war veteran, the top marginal tax rate in the US was 91% for people like Michael Dell. The top estate tax for people like Michael Dell was more than 70%. This is not rocket science. We can talk for a very long time about all these stupid philanthropy schemes. We can invite Bono once more, but come on, we got to be talking about taxes. Yes. That's it, taxes. All the rest is bullshit, in my opinion.
Thank you. Rutger is so right. The top is, last year alone, the wealth of billionaires was rising by $2.5 billion a day. And the wealth of the bottom half of humanity, 3.8 billion people, was declining, reducing by $500 million a day. It's not difficult to see why. If you look at the business model, Oxfam works with garment workers in many of these Asian countries. Take Bangladesh. A woman who is stitching clothes for the clothes we buy in H&M, in Zara, in the high street shops, earns $4 a day. She is always in debt. When she gets sick, she's not paid. She works 20, 21 hours a day. When she's pregnant, she's fired. That's in Bangladesh. Then we also work with poultry workers in the richest country in the world, the United States. Poultry workers. These are women who are cutting the chickens and packing them, and we buy them in the supermarkets. Dolores, one woman we work with there, told us that she and her co-workers have to wear diapers to work because they are not allowed toilet breaks. This is in the richest country in the world. So it's a business model that continues to maximize for shareholders and to cheat the ordinary people down the supply chains and to damage the environment, damage communities, and then not pay their fair share of taxes. The top executives of these companies are among the highest paid in the world. the chief executive of Zara is one of the highest paid people in the world. So we have a business model that has over the years grown to maximize for a few owners of capital and to cheat everybody else. And the business people who run these businesses, on top of that, avoid paying their fair share of taxes, have built loopholes across the tax system. We have a tax system that leaks so much that allows $170 billion of money every year to be taken to tax havens and to be denied the developing countries that need that money most. So we have to look at the business model, and we have to look at the role of governments to tax and plow back money into people's lives.
Ken Goldman from Silicon Valley. I'm going to make a couple of comments, actually. I actually came because I do believe we have an issue here. But I have to say, honestly, this is a very one-sided panel. It's extremely one-sided. I was surprised the way we created this panel.
Well, the whole conference is very one-sided.
Can I talk, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like to use swear words too. Jane, thanks for, I saw you yesterday at lunch too. It was quite good. And we make comments to swear words with anecdotes and so forth. And all I've heard about here is talking about taxes. I haven't seen anything in correlation of growth, which I'll come back to it again. And just a couple of comments. Today, the U.S. basically has the lowest unemployment rate ever, the lowest black unemployment rate ever, the lowest youth unemployment ever. We've actually reduced poverty around the world. No one's talking about that at all. People have negated philanthropy. Just read a couple weeks ago the article on Bill Gates and what he's done in Africa and reducing malaria, reducing polio. So why don't we talk about that? So really I have a question for the panel. And yes, I agree, tax avoidance is probably a big issue, probably a bigger issue than we think. But instead of taxes, what else do you, instead of redistributing wealth, what are we talking about in terms of creating wealth? You know, frankly, what people really want is a dignity of a job. And we've given more jobs in the U.S. We've increased the minimum wage, just like California, with the minimum wage going to $15. May not be a lot, but it's up from $7. So I'd like for the panel to talk about beyond taxes, which every one of you have talked about. The only thing you've talked about in this whole panel on inequality, what can we really do to help solve inequality over time beyond taxes?
Can I answer? We're not just talking about taxes, but taxes are important. Yes, we're talking about corporate taxes, income tax, inheritance tax, capital gains tax, all these wealth taxes being reduced and reduced and reduced to a point where they've been abolished in some countries. We need to get fair taxation. Bill Gates himself says the most important responsibility of a rich person is to pay their fair share of taxes. So we can't avoid talking about that. But we also talk about tax evasion, the loopholes. We are in a digital economy, but the tax system is from the 1920s. It's full of loopholes that don't allow revenues to be collected. And what happens when you don't collect them? Then you don't put money into people's health and education, and you widen inequalities. The gentleman who said we've just talked taxes and that jobs are there and there's low and unemployment rates are low. Let me tell you something. We're talking about jobs, but the quality of those jobs. I've just told you about Dolores in the United States who wears a diaper to work. That's not a dignified job. I can tell you about a company. I took a taxi in Nairobi recently, and I was charged, the minimum charge I think would be that. I was charged less than $2 for a taxi ride. Where in the world do you go in a taxi for less than $2? I asked the taxi driver. He was from one of these companies, I won't mention which. I said, how much are you getting out of this? He said 20% must go to the global company that owns the network. So I said, then what about the rest? He said, the rest I have to share with the owner of the taxi out of $2. I asked him where he rents his home, where he lives. He said they rent a room, 3 taxi drivers. They sleep in turns, 6 hours, 5 hours. because none of them can afford to rent a room. That's the job. Those are the jobs we are being told about, that globalization is bringing jobs. The quality of the jobs matter. It matters. These are not jobs of dignity. In many countries, workers no longer have a voice. They are not allowed to unionize. They are not allowed to negotiate for salaries. So we're talking about jobs, but jobs that bring dignity. We are talking about healthcare. The World Bank has told us that 3.4 billion people who earn $5.5 a day are on the verge, are just a medical bill away from sinking into poverty. They don't have health care. They are just a crop failure away from sinking back into poverty. They have no crop insurance. So don't tell me about low levels of unemployment. You are counting the wrong things. You're not counting dignity of people. You're counting exploited people.
I want to.
We had the financial crash in 2008. Now we've seen the rise of populists around the globe, right? Trump, Bolsonaro, we've seen Brexit. And what gives me great hope right now is that there's a new generation that is actually waking up. You know, that it doesn't believe the myth anymore, that the vast inequality we see today is just a force of nature, you know, an inevitable consequence of globalization or technology. There's a new generation that just doesn't believe it anymore, that sees that most of the wealth that's, you know, that's being possessed by many of the participants here has not been earned through hard work, but been extracted from workers who are doing the real work, but not being paid a living wage. So that is what really gives me hope. And that's, I think, what all these movements are about. It's about people waking up and realizing that they've been sold a lie. That's what's happening.